Writing this post was really difficult for me because I've never met an RHCP song that I don't like. However, I managed to narrow it down to 10. I should note that the songs on this list aren't necessarily the best or most popular RHCP songs. This is just a list of RHCP songs that are really fantastic and don't get the credit they deserve. In case you don't know, RHCP is a rock band or alt-rock band that was formed in the 1980s in LA. This is Red Hot Chili Peppers' underrated songs. Stone Cold Bush. Over the years it's been pretty difficult to really put the Red Hot Chili Peppers into one specific music genre. Although you can hear the veins of rock and funk in their delivery, there's a lot more that they have to offer than just being our warm-up for rap rock in the early 90s. For the tail end of Mother's Milk it looks like they were showing us their punk chops. From the opening guitar riffs of Stone Cold Bush, this is a far more intense groove than something that would come off Californication later down the line. Though Anthony's rhyme scheme doesn't go outside of the usual lustful lyrics, the appeal is all in his delivery, which sounds like a mix between his usual funk shtick and something that you'd hear out of a more self-aware Johnny Rotten. Wet Sand. As the years went on, the Chili's were known to be a lot more mellow. They could still turn up their amps and blow out your speakers when they wanted to, but there were a lot more musical colors that they could play with. And on Stadium Arcadium we found out just how many colors they had in their arsenal, especially on Wet Sand. For any Fairweather fan, you would never guess that this came from the same band that made a song like Give It Away. After years of honing their funk chops, John Frusciante seems to be looking in the classic rock playbook for a song like this, complete with a chord progression that even the Beatles wouldn't scoff at. Anthony also follows his lead, with a vocal melody that's a lot more refined instead of the machine gun stuff you find on something like Around the World, or even Hump Da Bump from the same album. Out in LA. And now we go back to the one album that started it all. Even though we like to think that the Chili's were on fire right from the get-go, there are actually a few parts of their debut that are a bit rough around the edges, like thinking that covering an old Hank Williams song was a good idea. On the back half though, we do have songs that show they were at least going in the right direction. Compared to the joke songs on the rest of the record, Out in LA is a lot more complete as a song than the rest, with Anthony Kiedis discovering his knack for singing. This is back in the day when the band was gently towing the line between funk and rock, so his rhymes are a lot more spoken word and rapping instead of actually singing. 1 Hot Minute. Most of the greatest Red Hot Chili Peppers songs are meant to put you in a specific vibe. Although there are a few tracks where they tend to go off the rails, you're not going into a record by them and expecting Radiohead levels of production or anything. On that rare occasion though, you get a song where the Chili's give you something you weren't sure they were capable of. Though 1 Hot Minute tends to get a bit of a bad representative with the rest of their catalog, that title track is still one of the most maximalist things they have ever made. Having Dave Navarro in tow, the riff itself feels like it's pulled straight out of an old Led Zeppelin song, along with a production that feels absolutely gargantuan. The Power of Equality. 1991 was a hell of a year for any stripe of music fan, as the sounds of the 80s were quickly fading from view. We got served landmark albums from everyone from Van Halen to Nirvana to A Tribe Called Quest. What's even crazier is that Blood Sugar Sex Magik was able to be released on the same day as Nevermind and hold its own. Putting the album into the CD player for the first time, The Power of Equality absolutely nails you over the head with its intensity. After a few years of trying to fill the void that Hillel left, Frusciante has finally found his groove on this song, going for his usual blend of Jimi Hendrix by way of James Brown with his guitar part. Porcelain. Out of all the ways you can describe the Red Hot Chili Peppers, subtle is not really the first thing that comes to mind. Since this is a band who was known for donning the stage with only socks over their delicate areas, you're not expecting someone to start playing Bob Dylan or anything. When they had the right idea though, turning things down a notch works wonders for the band. Californication as an album is a bit of a lot to take in as it is, so to have Porcelain breaking up everything in the middle just feels like you're applying a bomb on a burn. Up until this point, this was probably the most delicate that Anthony has ever sounded on record, almost like he's trying to sing a lullaby as Flea and John pedal away in the background.
Smile. Can you bear not to share with your child?
Cabaret. Once John Frusciante re-entered the fold in the late 90s, the Peppers were about to go on a run of albums for the ages. Although Californication marked the official return of the glory years and Stadium Arcadium was the most ambitious thing they had ever done, by the way tends to get a bit lost in the shuffle. Outside of the singles like Can't Stop though, this is probably the most California-sounding record they could have ever made. While Californication was a bit of a reintroduction to the band after a while, Cabaret is another instance where the band decides to take a few more risks from an instrumental standpoint, bringing in different sonic textures that feel like they're creating the image of the California skyline in your mind.
Take a cue from anything you do, if you want them to.
Warped. If you had asked people what their least favorite Chili Peppers album was about a decade ago, chances are you'd get a lot of people singling out One Hot Minute. Since this was the one lull album in between Frusciante leaving the band, no one really cared about what they were doing outside of the single Aeroplane. If they had stuck around for any of the other ones though, they wouldn't have missed out on one of the more intense songs they had ever made. Being one of the first writing sessions with Dave Navarro, Warped is one of the single oddest choices of single that the Peppers have released, with a whole opening section that is just a dark spoken word piece by Anthony. Savior. You can't really bring up anything about the Red Hot Chili Peppers and not mention Hillel Slovak. Although he tragically died of an overdose before the band managed to get big, you can feel his aura and his spirit across everything they have ever done. The Chili's can try to put his touch on their songs, but the best way to get in contact with him is to just sing about it. Coming towards the end of the Californication, Savior almost feels like the closest thing to a funeral dirge for Hillel, as Anthony talks about how much of a savior his friend was to him at his lowest points. Across its 5 minutes you can feel the grief in each section of the song, from the grandiose opening to eventually slowing down to realize that you're never going to see this person again. I Could Have Lied. Out of all of the Peppers albums, Blood Sugar Sex Magic definitely has the best flow from track to track. There's no easy way to make songs like Breaking the Girl fit on the same album as something like Give It Away or Suck My Kiss, and yet the Peppers and Rick Rubin made the whole thing look seamless. When the flow ends up being this good, you almost don't notice the fact that they took all the funk and rock away for one song. Being one of the only true ballads in the Peppers catalog, this is one of the greatest vocal performances of Anthony's career, making the character in the song feel utterly alone after being hung out to dry for cheating.